officially start today's meeting. Thank you all for joining. Welcome to the Interagency EV Coordinating Council. So glad to have everybody here. It's my understanding we've got several agencies represented. Hopefully all 10 of us are here, and about 100 people listening in, which is very exciting. And thank you all for your interest in this topic and seeing the progress of our EV Council. These first few meetings, we really have to get formed and set up and decide on how we're going to make decisions and how we're going to set up our committees and work groups and advisory council and how we're going to get work done. So thank you for your patience. I think this will get more and more exciting as we move into next year and really start working on our strategy for how we're going to transition to electric vehicles. So again, my name is Tonya Buell, and I am your co-chair of the EV Council, and I believe you might have met Deborah Reynolds already, who is joining me as co-chair for our group. And I'm so thrilled to have Deborah Reynolds as co-chair. I would like to give a brief introduction. But before I do that, I would like to give a shout out to Michael Furs, who I see is on the line here. Great. I want to thank you for your leadership in helping stand up this EV Coordinating Council. I appreciate your leadership on really getting this going, and all your work on this so far, and building your team internally to support this work. So thank you, Michael. I really appreciate your being on the inaugural EV Council meeting, and most importantly for hiring an excellent program director for the clean transportation, managing director, I believe. And I am thrilled to have Deborah here. And I do have a little bio. One of the technical difficulties is I have no connection to all my notes. So let's see. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Deborah, and then I will be going over the agenda for today and highlighting what we'll be talking about. And then we'd actually like each agency to introduce who's here representing, who's the lead, and any supporting staff that you have that might even fill in when you're not here. So without further ado, let me tell you about Deborah Reynolds. She has 23 years of utility regulatory experience with the Utilities and Transportation Commission, the last 10 years as Assistant Director of Conservation and Energy Planning. She was a key contributor to the UTC policy statement on electric vehicle supply equipment, and has overseen the development of rules for conservation, renewable portfolio standards, integrated resource planning, and clean energy implementation plans. Deborah served on the Planning Commission for the City of Tumwater from 2010 to 2016 and belongs to the Zonta Club of South Puget Sound. She's got 2 degrees from Washington State University, 2 grown children, 2 adorable Shih Tzus, sings in 2 choral groups, and lives in Tumwater with her spouse of 30 years. And now she is part of 2 co-chairs. So welcome, Deborah. So happy to have you here. Would you like to say a couple of words?
Thank you so much, Tonya. It is really fun to be here. I am so excited about this work. What an amazing challenge we have before us. I really am looking forward to getting to know each of you and to understand your challenges, to understand what you bring to this EV Council. I know each and every one of us brings something different. And as we explore the challenges in front of us in meeting the governor's goal of all new vehicles are zero emissions by 2030. Yeah, we've got our work cut out for us for sure. But I am very excited about this work and so very pleased to be here today. So thanks so much. And anyone can call me anytime. I'm in Teams. I have a new phone number. It's all good. You're muted, Tonya.
Of course. Excellent. So excited to have you here. And thanks again to Michael Furs for making it all happen. And so I'm going to go through the agenda real quickly. So folks know, of course, it's on the website at Department of Commerce on the Clean Transportation pages under EV Coordinating Council. And so we are going to briefly introduce all the agencies, but particularly self-introduce any new folks to this group. As we're forming, I think we might see some people coming in and going out, and which is great. We've got lots of support for this program. And then I'm going to give a brief update on the National EV Infrastructure Program. And then we've got 3 documents and discussions on different topics. One on how our group's going to make decisions, another on how we're going to create our different committees and work groups and the advisory council. Then we'll have a brief break and then come back and talk about how we're going to go about getting this work done with consultants and the hiring process. And then we have about an hour where we're going to go around and hear from each state agency that wants to provide updates on what's happening with their agency. And we really, one of the purposes of this group really is to share information and have one place where people can go to find all the information about all the state agency activities. And so we want to make that a regular part of our meetings to share what's going on. And then we'll conclude for today. So let's go ahead and do new agency representatives. Actually, Deborah, if you want to lead this section of calling on folks, that would be great. Thank you all, and again, welcome.
Thank you so much, Tonya. Okay, so let's start out with SEEP and Hannah.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Hannah Waterstrat, and I'm the director of the State Efficiency and Environmental Performance Office at the Department of Commerce, also known as SEEP. Glad to be here today.
Thank you very much. And let's go with Caitlin Kelly from Department of Health.
Good morning. Glad to be here. I am replacing Paula Reeves, who's transitioned into a new position, and so I will be joining as the Washington State Department of Health representative. I am our air quality policy specialist, and I sit on our climate and health team, so it really ties into this work and in thinking about the climate impacts from things we're working on in our across our state agencies and the impacts to air quality and public health. And so I come with experience working with across agencies and developing best practices for air quality and health guidance and collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you, Caitlin. And next we have, I think, John Lucas from DES, or actually possibly somebody else from DES.
Hey, I'm John Lucas. I am from Department of Enterprise Services. I just started in August, but my role is going to be electric vehicle implementation administrator. So we're working both on implementing electric vehicles for fleets as well as installing electric vehicle infrastructure. So really excited to be here with the group.
Thank you, John. Do you know who is the voting member for DES?
It's going to be Jason Marcus.
You broke up. Say it again.
Jason Marcus, he's our Chief Operations Officer, and then backup will be Courtney Spear.
Excellent. And Jason, are you able to unmute and speak?
He's not on the panelist
Okay,
right now, but let me go see if he's in the attendees list.
perfect. So I think I had thought that we were going to ask each council person to introduce themselves, but we are still working out the bugs in how this works. So we're just going to kind of recognize folks as we go through. And so because only panelists, if you have the panelist link, that's the only way you can speak. And if you need to speak, you can email Stephen Hershkowitz and he might be able to add you, although he's doing 6 million things. Okay, so I see Patty Enbody from OSPI, I believe.
Good morning, I'm Patty Enbody. I am the Director for Student Transportation, or all things yellow school buses, for the Superintendent of Public Instruction.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And Dustin Watson from Ecology.
Good morning, Dustin Watson. I'm the mobile source air quality specialist with Department of Ecology. I'm the technical expert on all the zero emission vehicle rulemaking that we're doing. So happy to be here.
Thank you. And Kyle Siffering for OFM. And have I butchered your last name, Kyle?
You're pretty close. It's Kyle Seifring. I'm a budget analyst here at Office of Financial Management. I'm filling in for Eric Hansen, who can't be here today. I'm a member of the transportation team here at OFM, the budget team. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. All right, and let's see, who else have we got? Jason Lewis.
Good morning. I'm Jason Lewis with the Utilities and Transportation Commission. Deborah, I may have worked with someone that had the same name as you over here at the UTC, just recently though, even. I'm the Legislative Program Director, and I'm really happy to be here this morning. I may have to go off video if my screen starts freezing, so I apologize, but just wanted to warn you in advance.
Thank you, Jason, and I recognize that background. Courtney, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, sorry, I'm still recovering from a cold, so I haven't quite gotten my voice back, but I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm actually with the Department of Enterprise Services. I work alongside Jason, and I'm the secondary voting person for Department of Enterprise Services. I'm the program manager for fleet operations. So
wonderful.
Excited to be here. I just wanted to make sure that you knew that there was a voting member here for DES.
Thank you very much. I forgot to do that. You're absolutely right. Yeah. So I am actually trying to make sure I'm capturing the voting members. Are there any other voting members here that need to declare themselves? I feel like I'm missing some. I know the Department of Agriculture was not able to attend today, so they're missing. You can pop it in chat if you're unable to unmute. Okay, cool. Well, I think that we are done with the introduction section then. And now Tonya is going to give us a quick Nevi update. And Tonya, I'm going to point out it is already 9:20. So we're 10 minutes behind. So, you know.
Well, okay, great. Thank you, Deborah, and thank you everybody for your introductions. Welcome to all the new folks, and welcome back from all the others. I will make the Nevi update very quick and get us back on schedule. So as you may recall, at our inaugural meeting in July, this EV Coordinating Council actually adopted the state plan that we submitted to the Federal Highway Administration for the National EV Infrastructure or Nevi program, outlining our five-year vision on how we plan to work to install electric vehicle charging, fast charging along all of the alternative fuel corridors as designated by federal highways. And I'm pleased to announce that our plan has been approved. Yay. So it's very exciting. I think about 35 of 52 plans have been approved, and ours was approved in the first round. And we'll be getting some comments back on things that we can incorporate into future plans. But it's a very good sign, and really the main purpose of getting our plan submitted on time by August 1st and getting approval is that means that unlocks the federal funding. It's federal formula funding of 71 million over 5 years. And it's going to be really exciting to get DC fast chargers every 50 miles along these key corridors like I-5 and I-90 and US 101 and others. And these are going to be a minimum of 450 kilowatt DC fast charging stations. So there's a lot of work ahead, but it's very exciting. And I'll be reporting on Nevi, and in early 2023, we'll be preparing to release a request for proposals for the installation of charging along these corridors, and I will be bringing it to this group. The EV Coordinating Council is overseeing the activities for Nevi. Although the funding comes directly to WSDOT, it's really important that we have continued stakeholder outreach with you and with other important stakeholders. So there's more to come, but the exciting news is that we are approved and ready to launch. Thank you. And so with that, that is the end of the Nevi update. So we're getting close to back on time. And so the next 3 items really are these decision packages where we need to decide as an EV Coordinating Council how we're going to move forward. And before we move to that, I would like to introduce Stephen Hershkowitz. I believe many of you have met him, but he is really the brains and force behind the EV Coordinating Council and getting all of the website updates, drafting our policy statements, working with all of the Coordinating Council members, just doing a fabulous job. So I want to recognize Stephen. He is the Commerce Energy Office Transportation Electrification Policy Lead. And I actually met Stephen when he was with WSDOT as a communications specialist up in our Northwest region, doing media relations and communications. And at that time, he reached out to me just to learn more about our transportation electrification programs because he had a personal interest in it, in all things EVs and climate issues. And when he left and moved to Commerce, I was happy that he stayed in the state family, and I think he's a great fit for this role in the Commerce Energy Office. And I really appreciate his experience in communications, media relations, climate policy. So he is one of Deborah Reynolds' first staff people and our support for this council. So with that, I would like to turn over to Stephen Hershkowitz to lead us through these next documents. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. I appreciate the introduction. It's great to continue working with you, moving over from the legislative coordinator role, which I had within Commerce for the last year, and then being a much closer partner to you in this work. And then obviously it was great to connect with you when I was at WashDOT, and excited to continue to build on that. So one note, as I start to transition into walking us through the background document for the decision-making process, which is where I'll start out of the 3 background documents, is one, I'm working off of a small laptop screen, so I will potentially not see you if you have your hand up. So just feel free to jump in and interrupt if you have any questions as I'm going through. And then the quick setup before I launch in is that the documents that we're going to walk through are the culmination of 3 different conversations that happened with what we've been calling our governance work group. So if you'll remember from the first meeting that we had together, we discussed all these different governance issues and decided to see who would volunteer to join a smaller group to really get into the weeds and figure out some recommendations to bring back. And that's what we're doing today. So I want to thank, I'm not sure if Michael's still on, but he was there from Commerce. And then Tonya, you were there from WashDOT. We also had Jason Lewis from the UTC on there, Dustin Watson from Ecology, and then Courtney and John from DES were also on that governance work group. So I just want to thank them for their time in between the first meeting and this one. And that, while I've prepared some of the materials in writing, they really reflect the conversations and determinations that were made on what recommendations should be brought back to this group. So let's dig in. On the decision-making process recommendation, it's pretty straightforward. Hopefully you've all had a chance to take a look at the one-page recommendation that the governance work group put together. There's 3 components to it. The first part is really focused on making sure we determine what quorum is and who from each agency is the sort of voting representative. And so you noticed when we were doing that at the top of the agenda, that was to make sure we had quorum to move forward and take actions. Now the actions we're taking today aren't necessarily directly completing responsibilities as in statute, but they're necessary for us to move the work forward. And so it's important for us to have consensus if we can reach it, but if not, at least get approval to move forward. So the work group decided that we wanted to make quorum at least 6 different representatives of the 10 agencies. So yes, we do. Thank you, Deborah, for noting that. We have 9 out of 10 today, so we do have quorum. Moving forward, the way that we'll sort of determine quorum and make sure we're complying with the Open Public Meetings Act for some of the work groups and committees that we'll talk about in a bit today is to determine who's going to be the primary representative. And if they can't make it to a meeting, to create some flexibility for agencies to still join, a backup or alternate representative from agencies. So that will be something that we try to get from everyone as a follow-up to this meeting. So that's the first section of the decision-making process. The second one is about agenda setting and taking up meetings. And so you'll see, again, in the next thing that we talk about, creating committees. One of the committees that we're hoping to create is an executive committee that will continue the work that the governance work group has started. That's where agendas for full EV council meetings will be set. And there'll be a process that's detailed in there as to how members, who are not on the executive committee can still get items onto the agenda. Anytime there's an item for decision-making that needs to come up, like this one, we're practicing this out, so it's a bit meta. There'll be an issue presentation like I'm doing right now. And then the co-chairs will lead a discussion to see if there are any questions or comments or concerns. They will then ask, and then so I'll jump into the third part, which is consensus, modification, and approval. This is all pretty straightforward, but we're going to try to reach consensus when possible. So the co-chairs are going to check after clearly stating what the decision is that the group is trying to make. If there's consensus, if there is an absence of indication that there is, not consensus. So if anyone raises an objection, in that case, then we would have to see if there's a modification that we can make to the proposal during the meeting to then reach consensus. If that's not possible, then we would either table it for a future meeting, or if it requires some level of urgency, take a vote where there would be 3 different voting options. Yes with concerns, so that we can take notes and make sure that while yes, we can move forward on it, some things need to be worked out in the implementation of that decision, or no. And then, of course, if we have a majority of members present, assuming we have quorum, then we can move forward if we have a majority yes votes, or at least six yes votes to move forward. Sorry, so yes, it would not be just a simple majority of those present, but it would be a majority of the full voting council. So that's sort of the walkthrough of the decision-making process when we need to make decisions. So happy to turn it back over to Deborah and see if there's any discussion or questions I can answer.
Thanks so much, Stephen. Very well done. And I will say one of the things that was beautiful about coming on is that all this stuff was already drafted. All this work was done. All I had to do was be like, yeah, looks good. So it's been wonderful. All right. So the first thing that we're going to do as following the process is I'm going to ask you if we have consensus. And this is your opportunity to say yes, or to say, I want to talk about it. So those are your two options right now. So the question before you is, do we agree to the recommended decision-making process? Anybody want to comment? Tonya, you should start.
Okay, great. Thank you for this opportunity to start, Deborah. So I was really pleased that the governance work group that Stephen described with 5 agency representatives, and along with guidance from our Governor's Policy Office with Anna Leasing and Debbie Driver. We had 3 meetings and had several versions of this. They're based on the work that other successful councils are using. And I think that we've reached a good, fair, open, transparent way to make decisions. So I support it. And look forward to hearing from others. To me, it's a lot like Robert's rules, pretty basic, and I don't see any big controversy, but am looking forward to hearing what others have to say.
Great. Jason?
This Jason or another Jason?
No, you.
So I support it. I think it reflects the discussions that we've had and represents a lot of good work that's been done by staff, and really appreciate the focus on this and just making it clear so everyone has a good understanding of the process and ways to engage. Thank you.
Thank you. Courtney?
Yep, I support it as well. I think it's very inclusive of all the discussions that we had, and I think it's a good start.
Excellent. Dustin?
I support it as well.
Thank you. Kyle?
Since I'm just filling in today, I'm going to choose to pass.
Okay. Hannah?
Yes, I support it.
Thank you. Patty?
I support it as well. Thank you.
Excellent. And Caitlin?
I support it too.
Wonderful. My goodness, my job is so easy today. Does anybody have anything they want to say? So otherwise, I have this whole thing that I was going to go through, but we don't need to because we just reached consensus on this. So we are good. And when we have consensus, according to our process we just agreed to, we don't have to vote. So yay. Thank you so much. So we are good to go, and we are ready to jump into the next memo, which is about committees and work groups. So I want to explain that there are actually 3 specific decisions we're going to be making about these committees and work groups. And so unlike this first one where we just took the whole memo at once, we're going to take a little bit more of a stepwise approach for this one. And Stephen is going to guide us through that. Okay.
All right. Oh,
I will
sorry.
also say, we're planning to take a break at 10:30. And so I think we're going to make it just fine. But if anyone feels like they really need a break sooner than that, let us know in the chat and we'll try to be flexible. Okay, thanks. Take it away, Stephen.
All right. Yeah. So, and again, if you have questions as I'm going, feel free to jump in and interrupt. And when I finish up at the end, I'll also check to see if anyone has any questions. So we're just going to start with the executive committee component of this second background memo. So the governance work group, in doing the tasks that were put before them, determined that it was really helpful to be able to meet in a small group to sort of steer the council's governance direction, and that kind of function would be really useful to continue on into the future. This is a pretty common feature of councils and other work groups, for there to be a smaller executive committee that manages those administrative tasks. And so in part because the 5 that volunteered for the governance work group are already engaged in this work, and also because I think between WashDOT, Commerce, DES, UTC, and Ecology, there's a pretty wide coverage of the state's transportation electrification work, and a good knowledge of where the other council members fit in as well, where there's ongoing rulemakings or administrative programs or help on budgets, all of that, used to working with the other members of the council. And so we understand that, like the governance work group itself recommending that it continue on as the executive committee, is coming from that biased place. It does make sense in terms of making sure that we're covering all aspects of what the council is doing. And so that's the recommendation that's before us. Again, its main responsibilities would be really agenda setting for full EV council functions, but it would also, I think, help the Department of Commerce, should we move forward later today on engaging in a consultant hiring process, help the Department of Commerce manage that consultant. There's a function for the executive committee in helping for putting together an advisory committee. Again, that'll be the next thing that we talk about. All these memos are really interwoven and connected. And then also helping with coordination with outside bodies, like, for example, the Environmental Justice Council, which is coordination that's written into statutory requirements. So that's a sort of a big overview of what the executive committee would be doing. And then it also doesn't mean that other members who would not be on the executive committee would not have an opportunity to get things on the agenda. The co-chairs would be responsible for making sure that they're checking in regularly with other members of the committee, making sure that their voices are reflected in those executive committee meetings. So that's the recommendation for those 5 agencies to continue on as a standing executive committee. And I'll turn it back. I guess I'll open it to questions that anyone has for clarification, and then we'll turn back to Deborah to lead discussion.
Stephen, can I ask a question? And it might be related, but I'm new, but since the Environmental Justice Council sits within DOH, is the plan mostly to engage with them, but not invite them to sit on this council or in the work groups, just that the executive council would engage with them separately?
I don't think that determination has been made yet as to exactly how that coordination is going to happen. I think, it has started to some extent on just a couple members of the council, I think, reaching out to DOH staff to figure out like what capacity is for the EJ Council and the best way to begin those conversations. But I think that's open right now, and would certainly look for your feedback or anyone else at DOH on how best to do that.
Okay, great. Thanks for the clarification. One thing I'll just note now, since we're talking about it, is my representation as DOH on this council does not reflect the representation of EJ Council. That's a separate staffing coordinating body. So just want to note that.
Yeah, thank you for making that clear. I think that was our assumption, but it's good to have that clear. Any other comments on that or other questions? All right, Deborah, I'll turn it back over to you then.
Thanks, Stephen. Caitlin, I have kind of a follow-up question. This is also a time when we could consider changing the memo. Do you think that's necessary, or are we good?
I'm sorry, Deborah, can you repeat the first part of your question? My audio had switched from a different headset, so I didn't hear it.
I was asking, this is an opportunity where we can decide we want to change the memo. I don't think that what you brought up requires a change to the memo, but I want to point out that that is part of this process.
I don't think as of now have a recommendation to change the memo as it stands, because it says to coordinate and engage with the council.
Mm-hmm.
It was more if there was ever to be a decision to invite them, would that decision have to be made now in approving this memo, or could that be adjusted later after we go through the process of engaging them, as Stephen said?
I think it could be adjusted later. I mean, we can always come back to these and amend them. These documents are not written in stone. These are guidelines. And this is we're being transparent and public about this, right? And if we change it, we'll be transparent and public about that as well. So yeah, that can absolutely happen later.
Okay, great. Because I think we definitely want to hear from them how they would want to engage and tell them more versus writing it now that
yes,
we're going to ask them to do something that we haven't engaged them on first.
Yeah, that's kind of good. It's always nice to ask people before you volunteer them for things. Yeah. Okay. So the question before us right now is, do we agree that we should create an executive committee as described in the memo? And we'll just kind of walk through again. We'll start with Tonya.
Okay, great. Well, I think that the executive committee is really the governance committee that's been meeting a few times in between the last meeting. And for me as co-chair, I think it's really important to have voices from other agencies, because this is a interagency coordinating council. And so I think having a steering committee where we can work out a lot of the details that we don't need to be going through at these EV council meetings, doing that separately and then bringing them to the full council, to me, makes a lot of sense. And I think we'll make a lot more progress a lot faster if we can be doing a bunch of this work offline. So I support the executive committee portion of the memo.
Thank you. Patty.
Yes, I support this. Thank you.
Good. Caitlin.
Yes, I support it as is.
Jason.
Yes, I support it as is, and appreciate the kind of interwoven nature that's set up in the memo. So any updates, if there's another decision on a different issue, can be reflected in what's here. So I think it was well done. Thank you.
Thank you. Dustin.
Yes, I support it.
Kyle.
I'm going to pass again. Thank you.
Thank you. Hannah.
Yes, I support it.
Great. And Courtney.
I support it.
Oh, wonderful. I hope I didn't miss anyone. I'm going through the screen at the top. They should probably actually have a list for next time, but thank you. We have consensus. Again, we are moving right along. What a great team we are. All right, cool. I'm going to kick it back to Stephen to take up the next part of the memo, which is creating advisory committee.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm marking down how people are responding to those questions. So I'll let you know if we are missing anyone, and it'll just be for you to vote on behalf of Commerce.
Oh, that's right. I forgot to say yes. I agreed to both of the last two.
Yep. All right. All right. So we'll move into the advisory committee. And so while we just created the executive committee, the advisory committee, I think we have an interim step before we get to like fully creating it. So the governance committee, our work group, was looking at some different models. We started with the model that Tonya presented to the full council at the last meeting, that the federal agencies are creating to support the Nevi program, and use that as a bit of a model to try to figure out like the structure of how this could work. We wrestled with the idea of creating multiple different types of advisory work groups or committees that would sort of fit into different perspectives that we need to hear, but ultimately decided we needed everyone's voices at the same table, and also needed it to be not so huge that discussion wasn't possible. So what the recommendation that's before you is to create for the executive committee that was just created to publish an announcement calling for applications to participate on an advisory committee, and that we would list out 15 different perspectives that we know at minimum we're going to need on that committee, to be very transparent about who we're going to be looking for at least one of. Doesn't mean there won't be multiple of the perspectives that were listed, and it also doesn't mean that other perspectives that aren't listed won't be able to participate on it. This is a floor that we will build upon in that selection process. What is not on this memo yet is a list of criteria that the executive committee will use to receive those applications and then make decisions about who they're going to select. So that's something that the executive committee still needs to do. And it says in this memo that that needs to be communicated transparently in the application process so that members of the public and stakeholders can see that when applying. And that, the process is open and clear as to how decisions were made. So the recommendation calls for the executive committee to undergo that application process, receive applications, and decide on a roster that they'll then recommend back to this full EV council before we meet next time. And we don't have a meeting time or date set yet, but we'll need some time to be able to go through that process. But our hope is to be able to get this done during the fall. So that's the recommendation that's before us. There's a list of in the memo responsibilities that the executive committee should communicate out to potential applicants as to what role the advisory committee is going to play, how its input is going to be sought and included. So I think that's also an important part to look at as you're making your decision. So that is the explanation. I see that Jason has his hand up.
Thank you. I just had a question. When we mentioned the criteria that still needs to be discussed and ensuring that it's transparent, do we have an idea of if the criteria is published or transparent, if there are comments, concerns, or discussion with anyone that's interested in the issue, how they would communicate those conversations moving forward, or is it more to have that available for information only? So is there an engagement, or is it just information only for those outside of the council?
So let me see if I get the question right. You're asking for stakeholders who want to be able to comment on the application announcement, how they could do that? The criteria, okay.
Yeah, I just know that we've already had a number of some interest, and there's a number of very technical aspects to it, but just also things that in our busy days we may not consider. Just was wondering if there's a good way to have a transparent incorporation of some of those good thoughts moving forward.
Yeah, we have had a lot of interest, which is part of the reason why we think we need the application process. So thank you to everyone who's watching and listening who has gotten in touch with us to indicate interest. We're trying to move this forward as fast as possible to get you an opportunity to participate. I don't have an answer directly on whether we would have some sort of comment process for the criteria itself. The one note I'll say is that we're trying to do this quickly, and that would, while it would obviously add the benefit of getting some good ideas in the mix and resulting in perhaps a better product, there'll be a time constraint as well.
So
Sonia?
Stephen, should the group approve this section, would the new executive committee work on the draft application and criteria and present that at the next EV council meeting? So the public could comment on that, maybe even have a public comment period at our next meeting to discuss. Is that an option?
So go ahead, Deborah.
I will note that in the memo, it describes this a little bit, and it says Commerce and Transportation are going to identify the staff to lead the development of the request for applications. And then the executive committee is going to review the submitted applications and determine a recommended membership roster that will then be recommended to the EV council. And our thinking was that recommendation of a membership roster for the advisory committee would happen in the November EV council meeting. So it's pretty short turnaround, because guess what? October's not that far away. So that's what I think. I would also say that one of the things we would invite is people can, if you have comments for us or recommendations about criteria, you can absolutely send them to that clean transportation at commerce.wa.gov. And that's an invitation to pretty much everyone who's here, all 103 participants. So, yeah. And so, as we try to make, our effort is to make this transparent and respond to timelines. So I don't know, Tonya, any other thoughts?
I think that it might, to make sure that people know about the opportunity to apply for a seat at the advisory council, I think being able to come back to this group in a month with those names will be, I think that there isn't enough time for that. I think because we want to give people adequate time to be able to submit an application. It's going to be very competitive in some of the categories. I know there have been a lot of private companies that have expressed interest. So I don't want to make any promises that we can have this advisory council, up that quickly. I think we want to do a thorough process and make sure we have the right committee members on the advisory work group. So I don't want to rush it and not, we're just trying to get our EV council stood up, and then to stand up a whole nother work group that we're going to be meeting with. I think it's going to take time. We're just figuring out today how we're going to make decisions. So I just want to set expectations that that I see having advisory council up like in January, up and running, but I wouldn't think it would happen like in a month.
That's really good. A really good thought, Tonya. I appreciate that. Does anybody else have any questions around this part of the memo? And I am getting ready to drop in the recommendation that we're going to consider. So any other questions?
So Jason, do you have your hand for follow-up to your original question? And then Hannah, I know you've had your hand up for a while.
I was just going to say, rather than any, true like formal delay kind of a process. Just having the public engagement at the meeting, I think, for me, makes me feel much more comfortable, and definitely in the interest of kind of moving forward. I'm for anything that I brought up, I think that that definitely covers it, and happy to discuss anything else in the offline as needed, and updating the council at the next meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
Mind if I jump in with a question?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so I understand from the discussion that with regards to the advisory committee, there's some flexibility and some details that are yet to be determined. One thing that I did not see in the list of participants would be a state agency representative. And I would suggest that the perspective of a state agency that's not SEEP and not DES would benefit that advisory committee. Thanks for your consideration.
Thanks, Hannah. Anything else?
So I guess on the on that question, does it make sense for us to put that in as we're asking for indications of support on this, just to make that clear that we would be adding that in?
I actually wonder, so the advisory committee advises the EV Council. And the EV Council is composed of state agencies. And so I wonder, Hannah, if you have thoughts about that, like.
Right, so
you're still looking for some additional.
So, SEEP and DES were right in the thick of kind of leading implementation of Executive Order 2104. And what that means for us is that we're partners with all of the agencies that are responsive to the requirements in Executive Order 2104. They're sort of our partners or our customers, and we seek and get feedback from them all the time. And I'm just curious if direct participation from one of those agencies that's not like, involved in structuring or leading that implementation, but is more responsive to it as a partner customer role could provide some input there. One of the things that we're also seeking to do is strengthen the relationships with those state agency partners to some of the other entities in this list, like local and municipal governments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess I'm thinking out loud that also we have these issue-specific work groups as an option, as a way to also engage other state agencies. So I think there's multiple ways. I am absolutely happy to add it to the list. I just want to think about how big it gets. So, yeah. Anyway. So what we'll do, I think, is we will do two things here next. We're going to talk about whether we want to add an additional state agency to the advisory committee, or if we want to defer that question for later. I think maybe one of the things I'm seeing is that maybe there's some other ways we can do some more engagement with other state agencies, but yeah, definitely it's an issue. And then the second thing that I have, the recommendation in the memo is this, and I'm popping it in chat because it's long. So it's to direct the Departments of Commerce and Transportation to publish a request for advisory committee applications, request the executive committee to propose a recommended advisory committee membership roster consistent with the guidance above for approval at the EV Council's November meeting. I am wondering if we could just say at a future EV Council meeting, based on some of the responses that we got, based on Tonia's concerns, based on some of the questions around what Hannah has brought up around, do we have the right people? You know, just to spend maybe a little bit more time with it. I don't know what the thoughts are. And I know we have a strong desire to get this thing moving, right? We don't have very much time before July 1st, 2023, if we wanted to get some of this money out the door. But of course, this advisory committee piece is really more around helping us come up with the strategic plan. So anyway, thoughts. But let's start with Tonya again.
Well, before we do that, Deborah, Anna has her hand up.
Oh, Hannah. Sorry, I did
Hannah.
not see that. Hannah.
It's Anna.
Oh, Anna, sorry.
Yep. Not an official EV council member, but just wanted to just chime in real quickly about the advisory committee and bringing in state agencies and follow up on Hannah's suggestion. I just wanted to draw the distinction that I think the advisory committee, I think, is more focused on the intent behind it was to provide input on the strategic plan that the EV Council would be developing in terms of what is we need to do, what's our roadmap to be able to be ready for 100% electric vehicles starting 2035, and then that stretch goal of 2030. Absolutely, we definitely want a diversity of input on state agency specific programs like our Executive Order 2104 that has our fleet electrification efforts, as well as, I think just broadly, how do we tackle EV charging infrastructure and also incentives, et cetera. I think we're going to get to that next. But I think that's the appropriate place to be bringing in folks who maybe not be on the advisory committee, such as I've seen in the chat, DNR, et cetera, as well as maybe other stakeholders who didn't make it into the advisory committee just because we need to keep that at a manageable size, but we definitely want to have input and they have expertise to bring and perspectives that we need to hear from. So that's just the distinction I wanted to draw was, remembering that, keeping in mind that the advisory committee should really be focused on the EV Council work as a whole on the strategic plan, and then the state specific programs and plans that we have towards transportation electrification can kind of get in more into the detail at the working group level.
Well, thank you, Anna, for that perspective. We definitely want to have a lot of diversity on the advisory council. We also want to keep it manageable, and which is why it has a 25 soul head count. And so, I think we narrowed it down. So I like the proposal put forward. I just agree that we should take out the November date because I think we want to give people plenty of time to be able to apply, and then have the selection committee is going to have a tough time making sure we have good balance. And so if we took out the November council date, then because I think we still have a few things to work through on the advisory council. In the legislation, the only thing that was stated was that the EV coordinating council shall create an advisory group, but it didn't list any membership or anything. So we're creating all that, and it's all new. So I think we just want to make sure that we discuss this more and have time to put out request for applications with plenty of time for folks to see that and respond, and move forward from there. So yes, with modifications from WashDOT.
Thank you, Tonya. Thank you, Tonya. So we are getting a few more little comments about the non-SEEP or DES state agencies, and I'm going to have a recommendation for how to deal with that after we talk about this part of the of the recommendation. So right now we're focused on this: direct the Departments of Commerce and Transportation to publish a request. That is the thing. Okay, got it? All right, so now let's go to Patty.
I support the recommendation, but I also agree that the November date should be changed to future date. So like Tanya said, with support with modifications.
Okay, thank you. And Caitlin.
I agree with Patty and Tonya in support with modifications.
Thank you. Kyle.
No comment. Pass. Thank you.
Thank you. You don't want to tell us that the date is unworkable? Okay, just check. Dustin.
Yes, I support it with the modifications that we've discussed.
Thank you. And Hannah.
Yeah, I support with modifications.
Okay, thank you. And what did I miss? Jason?
I support as stated in the memo, but definitely open to the support with modifications with the team.
Flexible, thank you. Who did I miss? Courtney.
I support with modifications.
Okay, great. So it sounds like what we have consensus, almost consensus. So wait a minute. Everyone agreed that support with modifications was okay. We have one person who said they would also support it with the November date, but it was an alternative. So I believe we have consensus. Do people agree with that?
I can also make mine more clear if that's easier. I support with modifications like everyone else.
Thank you, Jason. All right.
Thank you.
So we are changing the language in this to for approval at a future EV council meeting.
Yeah, and I see these documents as you mentioned, these are guidelines and that will amend as we move forward. So I think we should try to avoid dates on any of these type of documents, because hopefully they're still valid 2 years from now. You know, if an advisory council member were to leave, how we would fill that position. So I want these documents really to be helpful in guiding us in the years to come.
Thank you. And I think they should live, right? They should be adjustable. Okay, so cool. Jason, do you have something else?
I was just going to say, as we move forward, even though the date is going to be more future, I don't really think that means that there isn't other work for us to aggressively pursue this issue moving forward. So still going to be focused on this moving forward.
Oh, absolutely. Stephen Hershkowitz has a whole list of things he's going to start. So I'm pretty comfortable. All right. So one of the things that I heard coming out of this discussion is that we want to have some kind of discussion about how to engage other state agencies that are not on the council. And I'm going to suggest that we refer that to the executive committee that we just created. And the executive committee will come back with some kind of recommendation about the best way to engage state agencies that are not on the EV council. Does that, how does that sound to folks? Hannah, your hand is up.
Yeah, I would just offer, I'd be happy to consult with the executive committee to that end. And I'm sure my partners at DES would be happy to do that as well.
Yes, it is my assumption that the executive committee would be reaching out to you particularly, and to Courtney and somebody else, Natalie Wade. Yeah. So anyhow, so we're going to refer that discussion on participation of non-EV council state agencies to the executive committee for a recommendation. Sound good? Does anyone have any concerns about that? I'm not, since this isn't something we're actually voting on, because it's just a referral, I'm just going to say, do you have any concerns about that? And if you don't, we're going to move on. Okay, hearing nothing. Let's move on to the next piece of this memo. Let's see, what time is it? 10:11. Oh my gosh, you guys, we're doing so great. These are some issue-specific work groups that we've identified that we think we need. And Stephen is going to take it away. Hannah,
Yeah.
Oh, never mind. Go ahead, Stephen.
Okay. All right. So yeah, this is a pretty straightforward recommendation as well. In order for the EV Council to really get in the weeds on the kind of findings and recommendations that are going to be necessary to create this statewide transportation electrification strategy. And in addition to hiring consultants, which we'll talk about, and that's the third background memo, we think it's important to create tables amongst various program managers and other staff working on EV policies, rulemakings, programs together. And so we proposed creating 2 to just get started. And part of this, we had 4 that we were considering at one point, and we've dialed it back to 2 just because we still haven't fully staffed up at Commerce and at WashDOT to be able to support that many tables, all the facilitation and meeting logistics that go into that. So the 2 that we propose starting out with are one on charging infrastructure specifically. And we think there's enough specific work that has to be done on all the elements that go into providing electric vehicle supply equipment that warranted its own group. And there's enough stuff going on amongst various different agencies, from the Department of Ag's rulemaking that's going on, all the different funding programs that already exist at WashDOT and Ecology and at Commerce, as well as new programs that are coming online. All the work that's happening with SEEP and DES and the other state agencies on the executive order for fleet electrification and the funding that's available for charging infrastructure there. There's a number of other examples that are listed in the memo for who might sit at that table to start out. And then the second table, the second work group, would be focused on EV adoption more broadly. And so there's a number of activities that are, overseen at various different agencies, whether they be rulemakings at Ecology that we'll hear about later on today, that Dustin is heading up over there, regarding California's regulations that will create requirements on manufacturers. Department of Commerce has a new program that's focused on incentives. We have Department of Revenue and licensing work to implement the tax exemption. WashDOT will also have a update on one of their programs that's like a electric vehicle car share program, pilot programs. Has to do with encouraging the usage of electric vehicles. So there's a lot going on across the different agencies. And again, more examples listed in the background memo, where people could coordinate and figure out what's going on right now, what's working, what are the barriers, what are the different recommendations we're going to need to put forward on funding and policy to reach the state's goals. So those are the 2 tables that the governance work group is proposing. And the other component of this, in addition to again, the floor of who might participate, not a ceiling, that it's not an exclusive list, is that the staff that's facilitating these work groups in conjunction with folks who are participating from different agencies are encouraged to bring in stakeholders outside of state agencies to participate in work sessions and other conversations in these work groups directly, to get the expertise needed to create those findings and recommendations for how to move forward on policy and funding. So that's there will be opportunities in the way that this has been envisioned for stakeholders to get involved in some of those discussions as well, in addition to the advisory committee. So that's the quick explanation, and happy to answer any questions.
Okay, well, if there are no questions, I am popping in chat the recommendation. So should we direct the Departments of Commerce and Transportation to create and facilitate an electric vehicle charging infrastructure work group and an electric vehicle adoption work group as described in this memo? So I like this approach. I support it. And now let's go to Tonya.
Great. Yes, I think we need these work groups. I like how they're broken out by infrastructure and public outreach. I want to be on both. They exciting. So yes, WashDOT supports the creation of these work groups. And I especially like that we can invite in stakeholders to these work group meetings. Another chance for those that aren't necessarily on the advisory committee, but can participate in work groups. So it's open. So I appreciate that. So yes, from WashDOT.
Thank you. Jason?
Definitely support this, and just think that this is a critical element moving forward, and a very timely one. I also think it works well with the way that the advisory committee is set up for the state agencies to participate along with those advisory committee members. So support it strongly.
Thank you. Hannah?
Yes, I support this.
Thank you. And Dustin?
Yes, I support it.
Thank you. Kyle?
No comment, pass.
Thank you. Patty?
I support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Caitlin?
Yes, I support it. I really think it's a great idea to have work groups dedicated to topics and dig into the work. And I think it's good to have the opportunity to invite additional stakeholders in and be open as you kind of dig into work and find things as maybe you weren't expecting, and bring those perspectives in. Thank you.
Thank you. And Courtney?
I'm in support, just can't talk.
Thank you so much. All right, so we have consensus on that one. Great. We're moving right along. I think that we have finished this memo. So we're actually ahead of schedule. We have 11 minutes to our break. I am wondering if we want to dive into the next memo or if we want to take our break early. I actually think as smoothly as these have been going, it might be worth it to at least start the conversation on the hiring consultants. So that's what I would like to do. So unless I hear otherwise.
I, as your co-chair, would recommend that we get an extra long break this morning. That, we got through this quickly, reward everybody by having a little bit more time and being ready to go at 10:45 and staying on schedule that way.
Tonya, that is a great idea. Thank you for saying that, because work-life balance, people. All right, cool. So let's adjourn until 10:45. We'll be back.
Great, thank you. See you at 10:45.
All right, thanks
Thank you.
everyone.
All right, it looks like people are getting back into our Zoom EV Council meeting. Welcome back. 10:45. I hope everybody had a great extended break and were able to check your email or do whatever you needed to do. So we have your full attention for the last hour and 15 minutes because we've got some exciting activities coming up. It's going to be great to, we've already made 4 decisions by consensus and hopefully we'll get another one under our belt. And then we get to hear from different state agencies on what's going on with their agencies around transportation electrification. So it should be even better than the first half of our meeting. So with that, I will go ahead and pass the mic over to Stephen Hershkowitz to introduce the next topic.
Thanks, Tonya. All right, so the last background memo that's on the agenda for us to take action on today is on the topic of hiring consultants. So the governance work group, when going through all the responsibilities that we walked through as a full EV council last time we met, determined that there are some responsibilities that we're going to have to try to meet, namely the creation of that statewide transportation electrification strategy, and some of the public engagement and outreach work we're going to have to do as well. That requires some technical abilities that are outside of state agency staffing levels. And so that even as we staff up at Commerce and Transportation, and I know some of the other agencies as well had fiscal notes associated with additional staff, there's still going to need to be some external support from a consultant and potentially some subcontractors working with that consultant depending on their area of expertise. So that's the recommendation that's before us. Commerce included this in our fiscal note during last session when this bill was moving its way through the legislature, and we did receive funding in the FY23 budget to support bringing on a consultant. And so for that reason, and because Commerce based our fiscal note estimate based on a previous experience of creating a strategy like this, the state energy strategy, which has a lot of recommendations for how the state can move forward in a clean energy transition that ties very closely to this one. So because of that previous experience and the fact that we have funding in the budget this year, I think we're well positioned at Commerce to be the lead agency for bringing on this consultant, and that's what the work group determined in bringing forward this recommendation. And for those who are wondering, Commerce got a little over $1 million for staffing and consultants for FY23 in the operating budget to support the EV Council. So the other part of this, the lengthier part of this background memo is the scope of work that goes along with the recommendation that Commerce lead this process. And that's to give the full EV Council right now an opportunity to weigh in some detail on what needs to be included in a RFP that goes out in hiring a consultant to lead this work. There's 4 main tasks that are included in the scope of work in front of us. Process facilitation. So I think that will still continue to be led by the agencies in large part, but there's going to be some additional support we're going to need in just like setting up meetings and determining like how are we going to reach findings, how are we going to reach recommendations, everything that would go into a strategy. The second part is data analysis and modeling. That's really a big part of the technical abilities that we need external support on. The third part is public engagement and consumer opinion research. There are other states that have done some of this consumer opinion research that really helps break down what the barriers are to EV adoption and how folks are interacting with charging equipment. And so we think it's important to get that data that's unique to Washington residents so we can make the right determinations and a path forward, as well as continuing to make sure both in the creation of a strategy that we're getting communities and stakeholders involved in co-creating that with us. And once we have a strategy that details consumer education and empowerment recommendations, that work can be implemented moving forward. And then the fourth piece of this is sort of the culmination of those 3, which is really like that report writing that goes into a strategy development And there's a good amount of detail in there sort of explaining what we foresee at this moment in time. Obviously, this sort of moving forward today doesn't lock in a chapter structure in that report by any means, but we needed to give some level of information to folks in a scope of work as to what would be going into a strategy. And so that's the fourth component, fourth task. So that's a breakdown of sort of why we need consultants, what the scope of work would be. And then the last part that I'll say before turning it over to Deborah and Tony to lead discussion is that Commerce, being the lead agency, does not make Commerce the only agency that's involved in managing or working with the consultants. So we anticipate that Commerce would bring in other agencies on the EV Council in a selection process for hiring a consultant. We have it written into the executive committee memo that body would be working regularly with consultants on the governance and logistics administrative aspects of their work. And then we would anticipate that those consultants would be regular partners in these full EV Council meetings, presenting on progress that they're making and involved in the issue work groups and the advisory committee as well. So they're going to be everywhere that we're doing work on this, and sort of Commerce as the lead agency is really a logistical, contracting, managing, hiring and managing that contract. So with that, I will turn it back over to, I think, Deborah, although maybe Tony, I'm not sure yet, who wants to lead this discussion.
Yeah, it's me. Okay, cool. So the recommendation that we have before us is to approve the consultant scope of work as written in the memo, direct the Department of Commerce to serve as the lead agency, begin and complete a hiring process, and provide updates to the EV Council. And as Stephen just described, there will be lots of interactive work as we do that, as Commerce does that. And really the only reason Commerce is the lead, again, is because our budget request got approved, right? So there you have it. Okay, and so here is this recommendation that we are considering. So first off, any questions, comments? Jason Lewis.
Just to kind of reiterate what I've said at the previous meeting, definitely support this in terms of being able to meet or exceed the timelines that are outlined. I think it will add not only as a resource, but also in ensuring that we have great participation and outreach with everyone that's interested in this work. So thank you. And Stephen, thank you for outlining that so well. I think you covered a huge amount of amount of issues just very concisely.
Yes, he's got skills. All right, cool. So awesome. Let's go to Tonya. And first off, I should say, yes, I support this, mostly because Stephen told me to. No, it looks really good. I did get a chance to review it. Anyway, Tonya.
Yes, I support this. And just to note, since the EV Coordinating Council is not a state agency, we can't get funding directly to the council. So our work has to be done through other budgets. And I support Commerce leading the work to bring on a consultant to help us with reaching our legislative requirement to have a report by next December, outlining our investment strategy to meet those audacious goals that we have in front of us. So yes, I support.
Thank you, Tonya. Dustin.
Yes, I support. I think there's way too much work for the council itself just to achieve in the next 14 months or 15 months. So yeah, consultant would definitely be helpful. And I like the outline that Stephen put together with tasks and responsibilities. So yes.
Thank you. Kyle.
No comment. Pass. Thank you.
Thank you for being here to do that. All right. Hannah.
Yes, I approve.
Thank you. And Patty.
I support this.
Thank you. And Caitlin?
Yes, I support this and think it's especially great to bring in consultants to the engagement and the external communication fact sheets. I think that's a skill set that a third party could really bring that we don't always have the capacity at state agencies.
Yes. And Courtney?
I support.
Excellent. My goodness, we have consensus. This is great. Look how fast that was. Shoot. All right. So we have made 5 decisions today, and we have referred one thing to the executive committee. One of the things I expect to do after this meeting is to kind of put together a very short summary of here are the results of the meeting. So it won't be minutes exactly, but it'll be the results, and we'll put that out on the website as well. And now I believe we are ready to jump into our roundtable. And so first off, I want to explain how I see this working going forward. So this agency update roundtable, so it's great to have planned updates, like you have something you know you want to tell us about. But also one of the things I'm going to be asking as I check in with folks as we lead up to these meetings is, what are you struggling with? What are some of the challenges you're encountering in your particular area of the transportation electrification sphere? And so another part of this then is, I want, if you have things that you think are either future agenda items for the EV Council or things that you want work groups to address, this is a great time to bring those up as well. And so we are going to go through, and I am going to call on people. I believe actually, I have one other request. If you have not yet identified both your primary and alternate representatives for the EV Council, I'm asking you, and even if you have, and you haven't emailed Stephen about it yet, please do that. And we are going to start a roster that will be on the EV Council page that will list them. One thing I would remind you is we were talking about this quorum issue. If you have people who are going to be on work groups, you may not want them to also be your alternate, because if you have 6 people who are actually voting or alternate voting members of the council, you now have an open meeting. And so that's one of the things that we're watching. So just as you're thinking about that, if there's a way you can kind of think about that and control it, that would be great. But again, by October 7th. Now, any questions for me? Any additional comments from Tonya?
I thank you, Deborah. I appreciate your laying out this vision for this update section. It'd be great to also plan future agendas to hear what people would like to hear about in the future, even if it's bringing someone in from outside of our group or others. So I'm excited to hear what everyone's up to. So thank you for this.
Awesome. So I believe we are starting with Dustin from Ecology, and he has an update for us. And then I think we will go to Tonya, to the staff you have, and then we'll kind of work our way down after that.
So I think, Dustin, if you don't mind going second, Washut might have more of a time constraint than you do.
Sure. Right. I
No
knew
problem.
that. Thank you for reminding me.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I would like to introduce our WashDOT electrification team that will be giving you. First, we have in Reardon, who's going to be talking about Zap, and Megan has really taken this unique pilot program from a concept to actually launching a pilot. So I'm very excited about that. And then Kara Simons will be giving an update on ZVIP. So we got Zap and ZVIP coming up. And I think Megan, if you could go first, that'd be great. Welcome.
Thank you, Tonya. Yes, I'm the time constraint person, so I'm so glad to be able to go first. Thank you. Hi, everyone. As Tonya said, my name is Megan Reardon. I'm a grants analyst with WashDOT's Public Transportation Division. I want to thank Tonya for inviting me to spend a few minutes here talking about our Zero Emissions Access Program, or as we call it, ZAP. Sometimes ZAP with an exclamation point, sometimes ZAP with jazz hands. I like to make it sound really exciting because we are really excited about this program. I'm going to jump right in to give a brief description of ZAP, and then I'm happy to answer any questions you have. I see this as being more informational at this point since we have already awarded our first round of projects. And I put a link to the ZAP website in the chat in case you have any questions or that you want to find more information. You can check out the webpage because there are a lot more details there. And also I'm having some connectivity issues. So if you have any trouble hearing me or anything, please let me know. So basically ZAP funding supports zero emission car share pilot programs in underserved and low to moderate income communities that have limited access to public transportation or that are in areas where emissions exceed federal and state standards. The real goal is to expand access to clean transportation options and fill transportation gaps in communities that face barriers, largely due to cost and access to EVs and charging infrastructure, to even using an electric vehicle. Eligible applicants for ZAP includes nonprofit organizations and local governments in Washington state, and this includes housing authorities. The legislation allows the funding to cover any cost associated with the pilot car share project. So awards can be used to purchase cars and chargers. It can be used to update infrastructure for charging the car share vehicles, and it can also be applied toward operating costs or even planning costs as long as the projects are operational by the end of the biennium. We set applicant match at 10% of total project costs, and these can be direct contributions or gifts in kind. So ZAP funding is owned by WashDOT's Innovative Partnerships. Tonya was hugely influential in this funding, but the grant was developed and managed by the Public Transportation Division. So it's we have a partnership going to produce this program. I was hired in September 2021 to develop the ZAP grant. And I spent the first several months engaged in stakeholder outreach and talking with subject matter experts and then developing the application. And we opened the application at the end of March 2022 and just made our first round of awards this summer. The legislature set the award amount ranged at $50,000 to $200,000 per project. We had $2.2 million to spend in the 2021-2023 biennium, and we awarded the full amount to 13 projects across Washington state. Geographical diversity was strongly encouraged in both the legislation and in the transportation budget. So we really focused on getting the word out and engaging stakeholders across the state as we developed the grant program. You can see a list of the award recipients on our website. Recipients have 1 year to spend the grant funds for this first round and make their car share programs operational by the end of the biennium, as I mentioned before. And they seem up to the challenge. Projects are just getting underway, and we look forward to seeing how they evolve. And finally, we anticipate an additional $1.2 million in ZAP funding for the 23-25 biennium. And the website does have additional details on eligibility requirements and some kind of guidance on how to prepare to apply for the grant program. And I think that's about it. If we have time for questions, I'm happy to answer them now, or you're welcome to reach out to me. My contact information is on the website, and I will also include that in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Megan. Does anyone have any questions about the Zero Emission Access Program? Okay, well, it's really cool pilot, one of its kind, I think. And so it'll be exciting to hear how those projects Oh, so thank you again, Megan, for joining today and giving an update. Have a great rest of your day. And now I'd like to introduce Kara Simons, who is also a rock star, and she is leading the Zero Emission Vehicle Infrastructure Partnerships Program, or ZVIP. And go ahead, Kara.
Thank you, Tonya. Good morning, everyone. Just confirming that you can see the PowerPoint.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. As Tonya mentioned, I'm Kara Simons, Transportation Planning Specialist with the State Department of Transportation. And just like Megan did, I'm here to give a very quick program summary of our Zero Emission Vehicle Infrastructure Partnership Program, also known as ZVIP. The goal of ZVIP is to install new direct current fast charging stations, upgrade existing fast charging stations, and install hydrogen refueling structure. This biennium, we had approximately 10 million available as reimbursable grant funding, and we did complete an open competitive grant solicitation earlier this year. Our eligible applicants are nonprofit organizations, tribes, and governmental agencies. And because this program does go through innovative partnerships or the public-private partnership office, each applicant does need to have a private partner that stands to gain indirect value from the project. Our timeline, as I mentioned, is complete, but applications and evaluations were earlier this year in spring. Our proposed awards were posted July, and just like Megan and the Zap program, we're seeking projects that are operational by the end of the biennium, June 30th, 2023. ZVIP priorities are first and foremost a corridor focus. We want to complete alternative fuel corridors, segments of corridors, or fill gaps of existing EV charging corridors. For state funding, the state ZVIP funding, our priority corridors are interstates, US highways, and state routes. The stations we are seeking to have located at key intervals along these priority corridors. For EV charging, it's every 50 miles within 1 travel mile of the corridor. And for hydrogen stations, they need to be located at least every 150 miles and within 5 travel miles of the corridor. Although we don't have all of the Nevi requirements quite yet, we do want ZVIP to mirror those to the greatest extent possible. So for new stations, we were asking for a 600 kilowatt station or 4 CCS ports that are able to simultaneously charge at 150 kilowatts. Earlier this year, we did receive 24 applications. These reflect approximately 39 million in requests. These applications were evaluated and ranked by 7 subject matter experts from 5 state agencies. And you can see the ranking criteria listed there. This table reflects the awardees for this biennium. We awarded 9.8 million in funds. This was for 12 new stations and 12 upgraded stations. These stations reflect 24 communities and the highway travelers within those communities. 21 of the stations included a 110 or 120 volt charger for e-bikes, e-scooters, and e-wheelchairs. 11 of the stations serve the Justice 40 federally designated disadvantaged communities. One addendum to this table is that Forth and EVgo withdrew their application for the Sumner Winco station. So WashDOT is currently negotiating with the next highest ranked applicant to see if we can get one more station in this biennium. And here is the geographic context of the applicants. The blue crosses are the awarded applicants, and the gray dots represent the 80+ stations that were applied to receive funding. So my final slide, which actually was kind of set up by Deborah, is a future biennium look ahead. I do not know the potential funding that's going to be allocated to ZVIP, but some things to consider, and especially for that funding work group to consider, is how best do we complement ZVIP funds with all the other programs going on, such as Nevi implementation, the commerce and ecology programs. Just one example there is we know Nevi funding is going to be implemented in the federally designated alternative fuel corridors. So should state ZVIP funds specifically preclude those? Again, this is just food for thought. And then how to update the evaluation criteria is more food for thought. How are we going to incorporate all the recent happenings, such as the HEAL Act, Justice 40 considerations, geographic diversity, and the Climate Commitment Act. So I look forward to those conversations on how best to incorporate all this information into the next biennium's grant round. One quick plug for our Gov Delivery distribution list. If you go to WashDOT's homepage, at the bottom, you can sign up for email or text updates. We have 2 distribution lists that we would encourage you to sign up for. Nevi will be the official distribution list for all things related to Nevi. And if you're interested in knowing or getting updates about Zap and ZVIP, please sign up under funding and Zap grants. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you so much, Kara, for your overview and for administering that program and getting those signed contracts to move forward. So we're very excited about this. I do see a couple of questions in the chat. One is, can you talk a little bit more about the next round of funding and when people could look for applications for that, for the 2023 to 2025 biennium?
Yeah, hopefully it's a very similar timeline to this year, which we'll have a better understanding of the potential funding available in spring. So we would do our call for applications then, and then a evaluation ranking process later in spring. And then the earliest we could potentially award would be July 1st, 2023. And then successful awardees would have the 2 years, a full biennium, to implement their project and get those charging stations operational.
Excellent, thank you. And so the types of projects that we're looking for ZVIP can be electric vehicle charging or hydrogen fuel cell refueling. And there is a question in the chat about convenience stores, if that's a target. And I can let you speak to that if you'd like.
Sure, I'll take a stab at it and then feel free to help me. There was a slide that showed all the ranking criteria, and definitely stations, there's some minimum criteria, like it needs to be publicly accessible 24/7, but stations that are co-located with amenities are going to rank higher because of those co-located amenities. So if you're at a, it would depend on the situation, just the, it would be, of course, it would need to be located within 1 mile of the travel corridor. So if you have a convenience store on a major highway corridor and it's within 1 mile and you have 24/7 amenities, that would be a well-suited site for a EV charging station.
Great, thank you so much. And for the ZVIP program, the eligible applicants are nonprofits and government. So I'm not sure how for profit station, but definitely we want to have electric vehicle charging everywhere that's convenient where EV drivers want to find it. So that's definitely an option. In fact, we already have some EV charging funded through WashDOT's program at some fueling stations and shopping centers and restaurants and all different types of people places. So are there any other questions from anybody about this program? Excellent. Well, we're really happy to have your update, Kara, and Kara will likely be WashDOT's secondary person on the EV Council, so you probably see a lot of her. And we are looking forward to the next round of ZVIP, and we're really what Kara said about coordinating with the other agencies and their activities. We want to make sure we're not duplicating efforts. So so that's why it's really important to hear what's going on from each state agency and their different programs. So thank you so much today for joining us, Kara. Appreciate it. And I'm going to turn it back over to Deborah to invite others to come and present.
Awesome. I think next up we have Dustin. And Dustin, while you are getting ready to share your screen, if you are, or just, come on and talk, I wanted to respond briefly to Carolyn Logue in the chat. I've made a note of the questions you've asked, and we'll see where they fit in. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm going to talk about our clean vehicles rulemaking, which is underway now. So I'll put a link to that in the chat for everybody. Ecology is underway with our clean vehicles rulemaking updates. We filed our proposed rule on September 7th. We have a public hearing on October 12th. And the public comment period closes on October 19th. Our plan is to, after that date, address all the comments and then finalize the rule in December of this year. So let me talk about the rule and what we're proposing. There's 4 parts to it. One is adopting California's Advanced Clean Cars 2, which is their zero emission vehicle and also some criteria pollutant restrictions on vehicles. So it would essentially take our existing zero emission vehicle program and take those requirements out to 2035. In 2035, it would require 100% zero emission vehicles in the light duty sector. So that's everything up to 8,500 pounds, basically cars, trucks, SUVs, but not like box trucks and delivery vehicles and things like that. So that's one portion of the rule that we're proposing. Another portion is to adopt the medium and heavy duty engine emission standards from California called the Omnibus Low NOx rule. And that would essentially reduce NOx or nitrogen oxide emissions from heavy trucks by 90% by 2027. And so that's essentially, we adopted the Advanced Clean Trucks rule last year, which is the zero emission vehicle rule for medium and heavy duty trucks. And so this is essentially in that interim period before we can get to 100% electrification in the truck sector to clean up those engines so that we're getting the lowest amount of emissions possible during that transition period. The third part of the rule relates to the light duty zero emission vehicles rule that we adopted last year, which is to allow early action credits for automakers to sell zero emission vehicles before our regulatory program actually takes effect in model year 2025. So this would be for model year 23 and 24 vehicles. Automakers would be able to get credits. We've heard some difficulties in people trying to buy some of the most desirable zero emission vehicles that are not available here because when we adopted our rule last year, we didn't include early action credits. And so this is to essentially incentivize automakers to begin delivering all their zero emission vehicles here now, rather than waiting just until 2025. The fourth part of the rule is a one-time reporting requirement for fleets that have more than 5 vehicles above 8,500 pounds. So the medium and heavy duty fleets. If the fleet has more than 5 vehicles, they will be required to report just basic information on the company, the facility that they keep the trucks at, and then a little bit on the trucks themselves, so that we kind of have an idea of what kind of vehicles are operating in those heavier classes, the class 2B up through class 8 trucks. Right now, we have very little information on that. And so in order to tailor incentives and other programs going forward, we need to get that information to find out what kind of fleets we have operating and where they're operating and how old their trucks are, things like that. So those are the 4 basic elements of the rule that we're proposing this year. And let's see, I'm looking in the chat to see if there's any questions. Not yet. So that's that, if there's any questions.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Dustin. That was helpful. It's been pretty good to be following all these rulemakings and things. I think John Lucas, do you have something for us?
Yeah, I'll share for DES. I think normally this would be Courtney, but she's a little under the weather, so we're going to save her voice. Just what DES has been up to. So started off with hiring. We brought on an EV implementation team that I'm leading. And so what we're keeping track of, we're seeing what infrastructure projects we could get done. We had $2.6 million in funding from last budget that we've been using to get infrastructure projects done. So right now that includes 9 charging facilities at state-owned agencies. So we're keeping track of all that. Most of those projects are in the procurement phase right now. There's a bit of a lead time on getting the actual hardware on site. So we're making sure that these projects are getting their equipment ordered, getting it on site, and the plan is to have those installed by early next year. DES is also working to lead the charge on implementing electric vehicles in fleets. Sorry, noisy coworker here. So we're ordering as many electric vehicles of different types as we can so that we can have those in our fleet available for people to come check them out, rent them, use them as necessary, and get those on site. Again, lead times are kind of the limiting factor there on actually getting our hands on the cars. So those are kind of the hardware side. On the soft side, we're working on collecting data from all SEEP covered agencies. That's all going to go into a legislative report that's due next year. So we're collecting data to put together that report. We've been working with a consultant to help deliver that report on time. And we're getting all the data that we can from all the SEEP covered agencies so that we can make smart decisions about where to put chargers, as well as report on the progress that DES has made. And I'll pass it over to Courtney just in case I left anything out that she wants to cover. And that's all I have.
Thank you.
Nope, I think Jonathan, you covered everything perfectly. So thank you.
Awesome. John, do you prefer John or Jonathan?
John's great. Either's fine though.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I prefer Deb or Deborah. Don't like Debbie, so I won't call you Johnny either. Okay, cool. All right, awesome. Next up, how about Hannah? Do you have anything to share with us? You're muted. Okay.
Sure, I can just share a brief update for anyone who's not familiar. The SEEP Office at Commerce is responsible for working to electrify state agency fleets in partnership with the Department of Enterprise Services. So I'll drop a link in the chat to our website that's focused on fleet electrification. We have recently implemented a exemption process for agencies wishing to purchase internal combustion engine vehicles. We're like DES, we're also working to staff up our internal resources to lead implementation of this executive order. So we have some open positions we're looking to fill soon. And then we're also working with our partner agencies on what their resource needs might be for implementing this executive order in the upcoming biennium. And just will continue to collaborate with DES and state partners to this effect. So thank you.
Thank you. Awesome. All right. Next, let's go to Kyle, just because you're in my list.
Hi, everybody. I don't have terribly much to say specific to the items of this work group. I will just say that, as many of you probably know, OFM is in the just beginning of the decision package reviews for agencies. So to the extent that there are any budgetary requests and decision packages that cross over with the work of this group, or with electrification in general, or general transportation improvements, we'll be looking at those. And of course, if you want to point out anything or clarify or wish to contact us in any way, please do so, because that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's always good to know what's happening with the money. Okay. Next up, I think, would maybe be Caitlin.
I have some light updates, but overall, DOH doesn't have any specific rule authority to EVs, so I don't have any legislative or rule related updates. I think a big part of our role in this work is the use of the environmental health disparities map, and especially that's listed in that expertise that's going to be going into the work groups to use that map to help identify locations of vulnerable individuals. And so I did reach out for context. I sit on a different team than where that expertise lives. We are in the same office. One of the challenges with that map, is a really great resource for a lot of work like this, but it's a small team that manages it. And there's some staffing changes there too. One of the managers is leaving. So hoping that there will be capacity, and I'll continue to work with them to get their input into the work we're doing, but just wanted to share that. An update from that group, it's the Washington Tracking Network is the map that manages the environmental health disparities map. So if I use the term WTN, that's just the acronym for that work and team at DOH. So WTN gave me an update. So that environmental health disparities map will probably is going to stay how it is for about at least approximately 2 years. There is some work going on in that group to engage more with communities to ensure that future updates of the map would be better reflective of lived experiences of environmental health disparities. But I'm guessing that is going to go beyond maybe the deadlines for this group. So just an update there. And WTN, if there's interest in providing training on how to use that map and just going beyond just using overall rankings of the environmental health disparities map, they are open to providing some training on how to use that. So just putting that offer there, and I'm happy to answer any questions on that map or tool. And those are the only updates I have.
Thanks so much, Caitlin. Very helpful. Patty.
Hello. I don't have much to share. I can share that out of the 10,600 buses, school buses that we have in the state, 35 are electric. It hasn't changed much since the last numbers I shared. I expect that number to go up this year. Obviously, there's been a little bit of a slowdown on districts receiving any type of school buses due to the pandemic and the manufacturing issues. We have, I know that some districts applied for the EPA Clean Bus School Bus Program grants, which will be shared. The recipients will have that information in October. I wanted to share also that there were some concerns that I've heard, sorry about that, from districts that are hesitating to apply for the grants or purchase electric school bus. They're waiting for battery technology to improve so they can get longer range out of their buses. Also, more areas or more businesses that can assist with the maintenance of the electric school buses and the infrastructure. There have been some districts that have purchased the electric buses and they've been sitting on their lot waiting for the chargers to be put in on their property. And that's about it, unless anybody has any questions about school buses.
Thank you, Patty. It's very helpful to get that view into that little narrow segment. But it's also interesting to know that we have 10,600 buses.
Yes.
School buses. That's a lot. Okay, cool. Right on. Okay. Thank you so much. Let's see, who is next?
Hi, Deborah. If I could step in with some breaking news, there is a governor's medium article that just came out, and actually several of the folks on the EV Council contributed to Jim Capriva, who drafted this article, and the policy team in the governor's office. So I haven't read it yet, but I see a cool picture from the Steilacoom Drive Electric a Week event. And I believe it will include information about our EV Council and our work to develop a strategy to meet the state goals. So be sure to check out that Medium article. And I also want to say Happy Drive Electric Week, which is just coming to a close here. So thank you so much. Check out the article, and back to you, Deborah.
Thank you, Tonya. I love breaking news. We should try to always have some breaking news during this meeting. Super fun. Someone needs to be watching the feed. Jason, do you have anything for us?
The only update I was going to give was covered in your introduction. So I'm good for now. Thank you.
Okay. Do you have any update on the transportation electrification plans for IOUs?
I'll probably have an update at our next meeting.
Okay. The other thing you are welcome, anyone is welcome to do is to send an update to us and we'll share it. So if there's anything that is kind of emerging that you want the team to know about, we're going to be having a list. And so we can share that kind of stuff, which will help us all keep working toward the same set of results. Okay, cool. Thank you. Did I miss anyone? I think Dustin.
I just want to add something that I should have added when I was talking about the regulations, but our VW team, or Volkswagen settlement team, has a pretty interesting and exciting grant opportunity coming up. Let me drop this in the chat as well. It's for electric fire apparatus or fire trucks. So it's, let me get some details here. I believe there's $5 million available. The grant applications open on October 6th and will close on December 15th. Right now, the application materials and guidelines aren't posted yet. It just says coming soon. But on this website, you'll be able to see that information when it's posted. So it's a hard segment or hard use case to electrify. And so this is somewhat of a pilot program, but also a demonstration project to get some electric fire trucks in Washington.
Very cool, very cool. All right, well, I think it might be Stephen's turn to talk about what's going on at Commerce.
Yeah, happy to share. So Commerce received funding for 2 new programs in the FY23 operating budget this last legislative session that we are continuing to work on standing up, and we'll speed up that work now that we have Deborah on board to manage those programs and our new clean transportation unit. So what we've been working on before Deborah joined our team is developing a request for information that we're going to send out. We now have that ready, the language finalized. We're working on some last minute communication stuff to send that out hopefully next week. And that'll be for both $69 million in a program for charging infrastructure and $25 million for a program for alternative fuel vehicle incentives. So that $25 million was appropriated to Commerce out of a new account that was created by the legislature, the EV incentives account. That totaled $120 million. So there's still $95 million in that account that has not been appropriated to agencies yet, but $25 million has been appropriated to Commerce. And so that will be together with the charging infrastructure program questions that we put out and try to get feedback on. And then the reason we're doing a request for information before we design the programs and put out requests for proposals or applications is that, you know, we really want to make sure we are developing the program design together with stakeholders and communities to figure out what they need, where the gaps are, and really to hear from other agencies as well, you know, to hear what work Ecology and WSDOT and other agencies have done in installing EV charging infrastructure and where the gaps remain in communities. We're going to have a lot of scale up that we're going to have to do over the next decade to get ready for the amount of electric vehicles that are coming our way, especially with the requirements that are going to be going into effect through referencing California's regulations as Ecology is doing. So we're definitely looking forward to getting feedback from folks on how we should design those programs, how to make sure we're prioritizing all the different end uses that are in the legislative language, from multifamily housing to rural areas and everything in between, like ports and school districts. And there's a number of other ones like state government offices that are mentioned in that language. And then the EV incentives one is less defined. We know that we need to prioritize communities of color, low-income communities, overburdened communities. That, you know, that prioritization language is in the legislative language, and it's also a commitment that Commerce is making as we begin our implementation of the HEAL Act. So that's one that we're definitely looking for feedback on how we should be prioritizing those communities and driving up electric vehicle adoption the best we can, especially in the face of supply constraints that we've seen over the last year. So that request for information will go out again next week, and we'll hopefully have some more information on those programs as they move forward. We do have an existing clean transportation program through our Clean Energy Fund called Electrification of Transportation Systems. Many folks might be familiar with this. This is the second iteration of that program now that we are managing. And there's actually 2 different rounds of program administration for this. One round is really focused on getting the grid ready to support electric vehicle supply equipment. That's going to be a little under $1 million that's available. We had some initial applications already come in, and our team will be communicating out hopefully within the next month to applicants on how to move forward in the process. So hopefully we'll be able to make awards on that sometime on the sooner side. And then the second round is about $2 million, and that's for electric vehicle supply equipment, the charging infrastructure specifically. That one's moving a little bit later, but we anticipate a request for applications will go out later in the fall, with applications due in the winter and awards announced late winter, early spring. So keep an eye out. If you're on our Clean Energy Fund email list, you'll get more information about that ETS program I was just talking about. And we'll probably have a little bit of movement in how we communicate out which email lists stuff goes out to now that we're staffing up clean transportation a lot more, but hopefully folks will be able to get the information. So that's our update on programs right now.
Thank you, Stephen. That's very helpful. I am popping in chat the commerce link for contracting with commerce. This is where we will be posting these the RFI that's about to go out, the RFP for the consultant that we just approved. So just so you know, that's where it is. And there is actually a place there where you can sign up for notices when this page changes. So you will get notice that something has posted. So just so you all know. The one other thing I wanted to share is that although the Department of Agriculture was unable to be with us today, they did provide me with a link. Stephen, do you have that link? No.
I can find it and put it in there. Yeah.
Okay. So basically, this is just a quick update to, this is a link to a blog post from the Department of Agriculture that gives an update on where they are in their electric vehicle charging infrastructure measurement rulemaking. So, and it covers things like minimum payment options. So how you can pay for charging, that type of thing. And there is the link. And so I greatly appreciated them providing that to me so that we could share it. Okay. I think we have covered the waterfront. Again, we do envision at some point that there may be an easier way to provide public comment around these meetings, but for the time being, please do use our email address, which is cleantransportation@commerce.wa.gov. And that basically goes to Stephen Hershkowitz, right? You know, and so if just tell us what you need us to know. We're interested. We're thinking about it. We're going to be passing information along to the consultant once they're on board. And so we envision a really robust process. So anything else for the good of the order? Last thoughts? Okay, so the one other thing I would ask you to send to Stephen is if there are things you think we need to have on our next agenda, please send Stephen an email. You can actually just send it to this cleantransportation@commerce.wa.gov, and anyone can send it to that. It doesn't just have to be from EV Council members. Others can suggest things you think we all need to talk about. So I think that's it for today. Tonya, anything else from you?
I just want to say thank you everyone for joining and spending a few hours with us this morning, both everyone on the council and then all the folks in the audience. You are appreciated. We have our work cut out for us and are so happy to have my new co-chair, Deborah Reynolds, and our awesome support from Stephen Hershkowitz. And everybody on this council. I'm feeling very optimistic that we're going to do some great things together. So thank you.
Yes, indeed. All right. I believe we are adjourned then. Okay. Thanks so much, everyone, for being here. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.